So in this video today, I want to cover all of the legendary lords of the Dark Elves. We already know that Morathi and Malekith are going to be in Total War Warhammer 2, but what we don't know is maybe what's going to come in the DLC, or maybe some free LC, as Creative Assembly is wont to do, what they have got planned. So today what I want to do is cover the legendary lords in the same way we do any of our other units in our bigger lore videos, where we just do the little kind of lore blurb, then we do the little bit about my conjecture about what they would be like in actual Total War Warhammer 2, and just go from there. What I do want to start off with, though, is since we've already covered Malekith and Morathi in the video that's going to be linked to the end of this, the actual Dark Elf army as a whole Warhammer video, we'll cover the Age of Betrayal. Just like 2 or 3 big portions of it, just so that you guys have a better idea of how Morathi and Malekith kind of play into the High Elf history, where they're kind of where the Dark Elf and High Elf kind of schism happens and how it goes about, so you guys get an idea of what really happens with these two, how these players are so important to Elf history as a whole. Because keep in mind, in the early Elf history, there's a unified elfdom. There's no High Elves, Dark Elves, and Wood Elves. There's only elves. So it'll start off here then with that, and we'll come into the other lords and just kind of see how this all progresses. And we'll dive right on into this here blurb. So just to kind of give you guys some background, because this is going to start off right after Aenarion's death. So we do have the history of the Dark Elves, or High Elves and Dark Elves, in that Aenarion fights off, with the help of Kouran Dragon Tamer, this giant horde, like the largest horde the world has seen since, of demons. And Kouran creates this giant great vortex, as we've seen in a lot of the publicity photos from Total War Warhammer 2. And this great vortex is what actually draws winds of magic out of the Warhammer world, thus weakening the demons that would like to inhabit it. And Aenarion, though, Aenarion is, like, the very first Phoenix King, and he is the most epic and badass of all of the elf warriors since and to be. There's no one that really kind of compares to him aside from Tyrion. And what you get from Aenarion is this guy who unifies the elves and kind of gets them fighting the demons on more of an equal footing, aside from the fact that the demons are pretty limitless in their number. But Aenarion ends up marrying Morathi after his wife, his former wife, Ilariel, or I'm sorry, I think it's Ilariel. There's like a bunch of different names for the Ever Queen, and the one that Tyrion falls for, I think, has got like almost the exact same name. I just can't remember right now, because I'm looking at the Dark Elf book and not the High Elf book. But they end up kind of the demons attack Everlorn, and as a result, he suspects, because the report back to him is that, hey, your wife and all of your kids are dead. What really happens is Morleon, Morelion, Morelion, basically, is his son, who actually lives and allows for the line of Aenarion to actually continue up until the current day. And you have Tyrion and Teclis, who are essentially great repeating nephews of Malekith. And so after that whole scenario, Aenarion marries Morathi and has Malekith. Malekith kind of is born from the sadistic, kind of twisted, angry Aenarion, and not the benevolent, kind of somewhat enigmatic Aenarion that was pre this situation happening. Because at that point, Aenarion had pulled the Sword of Khaine. Essentially, if you want to think of it in very black and white terms, turning him from a High Elf to a Dark Elf, because that Sword of Khaine, it turns him into a demigod, but at the same time, it draws from him, and it also fills him with kind of a wrathful nature that the book talks about, how he's always just kind of at unease and always ready to kind of throw down. But we'll jump off here then with the Age of Betrayal, right after Aenarion's death. So, gotta get a big breath. With Aenarion's death, many elves looked to his son, Malekith, to lead them in this new age. However, a few raised their voices against this course of action. Some princes recalled the unwholesome rumors surrounding Aenarion's court, and feared what Mark might have been left on a child raised in such climes. In the end, the doubters prevailed, and Belshazzar of Tiranoc was elected. Malekith took the decision with good grace and was the first to swear fealty, even though resentment ruled his heart. Morathi, however, was not so sanguine, but ranted and railed against the iniquities heaped upon her son. Malekith soon departed overseas, and in his absence, Ulthuan was beset by new travails. With the threat of war lifted, many elves became selfish, indulging their heightened senses with ceremonies dedicated to forbidden gods. From the ancient incense-choked temples of Naggaroth, cults of luxury, pleasure, and excess spread unrest across the 10 realms. Belshazzar seemed powerless. Princes caught in the grip of the cults began to whisper that the Phoenix King was weak and a usurper besides. Whilst Belshazzar floundered, Malekith traveled the world. In the newly founded city of Torlesi, he met and married Alisara, a priestess of Lilith. At that time, Torlesi was the eastern frontier of the Elven Empire, and the constant threat of orc hordes and chaos beasts of the deep woods ensured that there was work enough to sate his warrior's soul. It was in such battles that Malekith made common cause with the dwarfs, whose civilization was then spreading westward from the mountains. Soon Belshazzar had little choice but to recognize Malekith's deeds and appoint him ambassador to the Dwarf High King. In time, Malekith grew restless and resumed his travels. He searched for his father's armor upon the Blighted Isle and stood transfixed before the altar of Khaine. He journeyed to realms that history has now forgotten and brought war to the despotic kingdoms of the East. In the frozen north, Malekith discovered a dead city of impossible age, and within its ancient vaults he found an ageless iron crown imbued with the blackest of sorceries. This circlet of iron awoke a dark curiosity in Malekith, and from that day forth the prince turned his will to studying the forbidden depths of magic. Absorbed with his studies, Malekith returned to Torlesi. Alisara rejoiced at his return, but as his obsession became plain, she soon grew wary. Worse, where she had once seen Malekith's destiny as a shining line of silver, his fate now was hidden from her. One night, a month after Malekith's return, Lilith finally sent Alisara a vision. The next morning, Malekith awoke to find Alisara gone. At first, he searched long and hard for her, but soon his obsession with magic returned and drowned her memory in its dark waters. Malekith soon took a ship westwards to Ulthuan and his stolen birthright. It was now a realm in turmoil, and many of its princes looked to him as a potential savior. Malekith accepted gladly. Vowing to exterminate the forbidden cults, he took to his work with a ruthless enthusiasm. Month by month he announced fresh victories, yet always ultimate triumph seemed out of reach. Thousands of cultists were captured, but more always took their place. When Malekith discovered Morathi was the chief power behind the cults, he publicly renounced her and ordered her imprisonment. In secret, however, mother and son seemed to further their shared cause of Belshazzar's downfall. In the end, it seemed that nothing short of outright war would quell the rising tide of decadence. Thus did Malekith ask the Phoenix King to convene the Council of Princes at the Shrine of Asuryan on the pretext of requesting control of Ulthuan's armies. Yet even as the princes gathered, Malekith set his true plan in motion. Unbeknownst to the others, Naggaroth's armies had begun to march, their ranks bolstered by depraved cultists. Oblivious to the peril that descended upon their lands, the princes arrived at the shrine and listened in horror as Malekith declared Belshazzar to be a cultist, a claim that was not easily denied, as the Phoenix King had taken poison when confronted. The princes were not swayed and denounced Malekith as a murdering traitor. Just then, agents from Naggaroth broke into the shrine and attacked the princes. As blood spilled across the floor, Malekith strode into the sacred flames to seize Asuryan's blessing. He screamed as the fires stripped away his hair, skin, and flesh. Malekith could no longer endure, and with a final shriek of agony, hurled himself clear. Abandoning the battle with the princes, his disciples took up Malekith's smoking form and fought their way clear, leaving carnage in their wake. So the book then describes a series of battles and a series of back and forth wins between the princes from Calador, stuff like that, and what really happens with a lot of what goes on martially in the Civil War here. But it then concludes with this one little portion I want to cover, this last portion for Malekith and Morathi here. But this kind of goes into what happens with everything, and how Naggaroth becomes Naggaroth, and how Naggaroth, where he is originally from, kind of disappears. But because it kind of it just kind of disappears, and we don't really know how up to this point. So this sheds on the light that I haven't really touched on in a lot of the videos. So this show tells you exactly how it disappeared and to what extent. So as the Witch King's sorcerers stood upon the summits of their black towers and struggled for control of the vortex, the mages of Sapphire roused their own magic to thwart the spells of unbinding. I should mention that at this point, the Dark Elves are trying to literally unbind the Great Vortex to restore as much magic that they can use to their aid to the world. But at the same time, this would bring the demons back. So, great forces shook the lands. The mountains trembled and the seas heaved as dark and light waged a mystical battle. As night came, the stars obscured by flickering witch lights and coronas of magical energy, the Witch King and his coven exerted the last of their strength. It was then, at the very moment of the Great Vortex began to fail, that a new power entered the contest. Freed from their long stasis, Kalidor Dragon Tamer and his trapped mages returned to the realm of the living. Instantly realizing Ulthuan's peril, they added their own incantations to that of the Phoenix King's wizards, and with a colossal release of magical energy, they dragged the vortex back into place. The backlash tore Ulthuan asunder. A tidal wave 1,000 feet high crashed upon the northern coasts, engulfing Naggaroth and Tiranoc. Cities were washed away and countless thousands perished. As the deluge swept down upon Naggaroth, the Witch King's followers used the last of their sorcerous powers to ride out of the storm. Energized with dark magic, their black citadels broke free and rose upon the frothing waves. Malekith's plan had failed, and his energies was spent. His kingdom lay beneath the waves, and his army was all but destroyed. Upon the floating castles of Naggaroth, the Black Arks, as they would be called in later years, the Witch King and his minions fled the wrath of the cataclysm they had unleashed. North and west they traveled, across the churning seas, to the desolate wilderness of Naggaroth. So you see how the Black Arks come into effect here. You see how Naggaroth is essentially built from the citadels and keeps, as they literally say, of old Naggaroth. But we will now touch here on the other legendary lords. I want to go into... there pretty much is a legendary lord for every single special unit of Dark Elves. So you've got the Witch Elves, you've got the Executioners, you've got the Black Guard, you've got Beastmasters and the such. There isn't precisely one for all of them, but it's pretty damn close. As I check here, I think the only one who doesn't have an actual... As I'm checking to see what this guy was. I can't remember who this dude is. Yeah. Oh yeah, so there's that one for the Executioner. So there's not one for like the Shades. There's not one for the Cold One Knights necessarily. I guess you could look as Malus Darkblade as kind of like a special character, Cold One Knight, in so many ways. But there is one for some of the others. But we'll go into them each one. I don't want to spoil the goodies. We'll go into each one here, and then we'll just kind of close everything out after that. That's there's about 5 or 4 or 5 of them. So it's a good little portion, and we'll get into the nitty gritty on all of them. Really kind of kick off with Hellebron here, and this is one that a lot of people were pretty surprised wasn't in the game because it's a pretty titastic legendary lord. So Hellebron, the Blood Queen of Ganeth. Crone Hellebron is the most ancient of the Hag Queens, and second only to Morathi in Kane's sight. However, while the youth and beauty of Morathi never fades, that of Hellebron is now almost expended, for the Hag sorceress deliberately withheld from her the deepest secrets using the cauldrons of blood. Therefore, ever more sacrifices are needed to fill Hellebron's cauldron each year, and yet the rejuvenating effects last for less and less time. Once beautiful beyond measure, the Blood Queen must now endure many dark months with the visage of an old and ugly crone for each stolen day of vibrant youth. It is chiefly for this reason that Hellebron hates Morathi, and her wrath at the deception is only deepened by the knowledge that she would have performed the exact same betrayal had their position been reversed. So it is that for many nights of the year, Hellebron holds court hooded and cloaked to conceal her haggard appearance. Only her closest attendants are permitted to see the full horror of her aged and withered form, and they are sworn to silence under pain of death. It is only on the days following Death Night, where her flesh and form are renewed to full vigor, that Hellebron walks the world unveiled, reveling in the power and sensation of youth. Those who wish a boon of her are well advised to seek it in this brief window of joy. For all the other times her mood is capricious and sour, and an audience with her is very likely fatal. Ugly and worn as she may be, Hellebron remains the greatest of the brides of Khaine. Her mastery of the many ways of murder eclipses even that of Morathi, who is often too distracted by her sorcerer's pursuits, and far outstrips the skills of the other Hag Queens. It is she who leads the Lord of Murder's unholy rites and dictates the holy creed that all witch elves must follow. She is so steeped in the ways of death that her merest touch can kill, and a single whispered word from her withered lips can open up old wounds to bloody life. Wherever Hellebron treads, the gaze of Khaine follows. Inevitably, insane fervor sweeps all over those in her path, driving not only witch elves, but dark elves of all callings into a maddened frenzy, fit to drown the world in blood. So, I'm not sure if it's Hellebron or Hellebron, Hellebron. You guys are always pretty keen on the pronunciation, so do let me know. And we've talked about Hellebron a little bit when we went over Naggaroth, the cities of, and who rules them. So Hellebron is actually the ruler of Ganeth. And the lore doesn't go into her a whole ton. It more does in the end times when they try to close off all the plot holes of every single character, more or less, in end times. Oh yeah, kill this guy, kill this guy, kill this guy. Like, they say for the end times that Malekith gets all burned as part of a test to Asuryan. He actually was supposed to be the leader of all the elves all along. So a lot of bullshit happens in that, but, you know, is what it is. So Hellebron is going to be basically your Hag Queen special character that we've already seen from the roster revealed. And the Hag Queen is going to have her Witch Brews, which is fucking great news. For those of you who don't recall, those Witch Brews confer certain bonuses depending on which one was rolled up. Let me take a look here for you. Canine Assassins, the Sorceress. I can't remember them off the top of my head, so I gotta refer back here to the old bookaroo that I'm looking at. The unfortunate thing about the Dark Elf book is it doesn't have the kind of structure that the other ones do. Because I think it was actually a pretty early 8th edition reveal here, so everything kind of changes here. So let's see, where is this? Yeah, so the Death Hag has got the Witch Brews, which also give, I'm sorry, they don't, I'm thinking of the poisons. So the Witch Brews actually just kind of give frenzy, like we talked about. So the Witch Brews will make your units fight harder and faster, better, whatever Kanye West says. But Hellebron herself has got a couple magic items here. She's got the Death Sword and the Cursed Blade. The Death Sword glistens with murder, and the Cursed Blade moves with a life of its own. And they are basically what turned Hellebron into a meat blender. Or meat grinder, I guess you could say. What the hell? Meat blender? That sounds so vile. Holy shit. Essentially what happens is, so every time someone's trying to fight Hellebron, if they pretty much fail outright, they suffer more damage. So maybe you see the Death Sword and the Cursed Blade is maybe adding obviously an AP and anti-infantry characteristic, because she's going to be a Death Hag, so she's going to have that characteristic of being very fighty, but not as strong toughness-wise. She's not going to be the tankiest of all tanks. She's definitely going to be kind of a glass cannon, as it's called. So the Death Sword and the Cursed Blade might kind of have an aspect where it reduces the melee attack or melee strength of a fighter, because that's kind of what it does here in the tabletop. Also, she's got the Amulet of Dark Fire, and this is an amulet wreathed. This amulet wreathes its wearer in a mystical flame that burns magic instead of flesh. So, basically, what happens is, anytime she's the subject of a spell, she has a chance to outright dispel it, which is kind of cool. I could see that as maybe just a magic resistance buff for Total War Warhammer 2. I just kind of like, oh, here gives a static like 22% or 44% timed buff to magic resistance, and maybe an aura around her to give it a little bit more utility. That's ultimately what I can see that happening. But Hellebron is definitely going to be more of your duelist, kind of get up there and fight type lord. We do have another lord that's going to fit more to the assassin role. There's a pun intended on that, but we'll get to that in a second here. But we'll jump on over to probably my favorite lord of the Dark Elves. I like Malekith, but I hate his model. His model is really stupid and clunky, I think. They never got a really good revival when they did the 8th edition, like a lot of the other big kits, a lot of the other big dragon kits. So he looks kind of blocky and crappy. His crown of iron's on like a very pointed antler like it is in the trailers we've seen here. It's very kind of crappy, and his face in general looks very rough and broad. So I'm not a huge fan of Malekith's model. His lore and his character profile are fucking amazing. But Malus Darkblade here now is probably my favorite Dark Elves legendary lord. So we'll jump into him. There's a whole amazing series on Malus Darkblade that I don't know a ton about. I was never able to read it, but we'll jump in here and you guys can get at least a good idea of what happens with him, because the series was so good and so successful, and this is something that Games Workshop actually does a lot. They took the actual fiction created from that novel and incorporated it into his lore. And they do that with a lot of their lords and a lot of their characters that people write such amazing lore for, that people get so heavily behind that they say, hey, yeah, okay, we'll put it in the game. It'll be official. It'll be in a book. So this will be Malus Darkblade. Malus Darkblade was always ambitious, even by the lofty standards of Hag Graef's warring families. For long years, he played the deadly game of politics and assassination and played it well. But finally, his thirst for power led Darkblade into the clutches of a being darker than he. Rumors of a great power hidden in the distant north set Darkblade on a quest that led him deep into the realms of chaos. It is testament to Darkblade's determination that he not only survived his journey, but at last came before the temple of Kul Hadar, in which his prize could be found. Alas for Darkblade, the great power within the temple was something not easily bent to the mortal will. Long centuries ago, the demon Zarkon had been bound within Kul Hadar, and Darkblade now unwittingly presented it an opportunity for escape. Blinded by avarice, Darkblade was possessed by the demon. In that instant, his life and soul were forfeit. He had but one way of escaping his fate: to find the 5 artifacts of power that would fully free Zarkon from his ancient prison, and thus see Darkblade's soul restored. He had only a year to succeed, or else remain in the demon's thrall for eternity. Though the search took every waking hour of the allotted year, Darkblade finally succeeded in his quest. Upon the eve of his doom, he returned to Kul Hadar with the artifacts, and performed the ritual that would set the demon free. But Zarkon had tricked the Dark Elf. Upon escaping from Darkblade's body, the treacherous demon stole his black soul. From that moment on, the fates of Darkblade and Zarkon were forever intertwined. In the years since, Darkblade has become legendary in Naggaroth, as a great warrior and leader whose hatred can overcome any opposition. Wielding the warped sword of Khaine, the only surviving artifact in the long-distance quest, Darkblade has hacked a path of bloody ruin across the frozen north, drawing upon Zarkon's power when needed, but relying first and foremost on his own dark determination and limitless reservoir of hate. So, Malus Darkblade is actually a really, really, very, very strong legendary lord. He almost has the same stat profile as a dragon. He's got 7 weapon skill, but he does have pretty low toughness and wound. Really high initiative, high leadership. He moves quite quick but he is an elf, so that is quite common. But I really enjoy Malus Darkblade. I think his background is really cool. I like, as you see from his lore, it's kind of a bit of an anti-hero role almost. He seemed to have been a little bit more jovial before he kind of got his soul ripped from his body, but you know what? Hey, it is what it is. He does have Spite, is a special cold one of his, and Spite actually is not subject to the same issues, I guess you could say, that other cold ones have. They were talking about those issues and how the cold ones are going to be kind of have that same mechanic that the Lizardman Rampage does. But with Malus Darkblades, I could see that in Total War Warhammer 2 not existing. Spite in this game does not have stupidity, and he also benefits from eternal hatred, so that's kind of cool. It basically makes it so that he has the same kind of benefits that Malus Darkblade has against High Elves, which is just fucking dandy. So Zarkon actually, though, can, I don't want to say, well, I guess you could say, here, Malus Darkblade may unleash the power of Zarkon at the start of any friendly movement phase. Once the demon is released, he cannot be bound back during the battle. So basically, he can release Zarkon's power, and it allows, he gives special rules to him. So essentially what it does is it grants frenzy to Malus Darkblade himself, and increases his weapon skill, strength, toughness, and initiative. So it means he attacks harder, faster, is harder to kill, and he gets the ability to have, like, I guess, the equivalent of higher melee attack. So this could be like a timed buff we could see in Total War Warhammer 2, where it does pretty much benefit all of his attack his attack and a little bit of his defensive capabilities, but mainly attacking. So weapon strength, melee attack, then maybe his melee defense. So this way he's a little bit tankier and at the same time a lot more deadly on the battlefield as well. It does infer a penalty for Malus as well, because he can actually suffer wounds from it over time. So maybe this is like a negative. Maybe it's like a slow poison on him and slowly drains his health away. That'd be kind of an interesting dynamic they could put into this to kind of help balance that out, because it's a pretty substantial buff even in tabletop. So I would assume that they would want to do kind of something to curb that a little bit in Total War Warhammer 2 if they added it in its entirety. So he does have a magic item here, the Warp Sword of Khaine. This is one of the 5 fabled treasures that Malus had to retrieve in his quest to rid himself of the demon that possesses him. Basically what happens here is it turns him into even more of a powerhouse. So failed to wound rolls made with Warp Sword of Khaine must be re-rolled. So basically anytime he tries to put the kibosh on someone and he fails to do it roll-wise, he can just roll it again. And nothing can do an armor save against it, so it would lead me to believe probably an AP characteristic, a bonus to melee attack and melee and weapon strength, because obviously he's not going to have it to start off with. Also maybe a capability that gives it an anti-infantry, maybe he'll probably already be something like an anti-large or an anti-infantry. Maybe this will confer an additional bonus on top of that. But that's Malus Darkblade here. He's going to be your kind of cavalry lord. He is what you could assume is the closest thing to the Cold One Knight's legendary lord. He doesn't quite honestly fit it. He fits more in the lines of a dreadlord or a master, but I did want to bring him up here as maybe the potential of a Cold One Knight legendary lord here. But let's jump on over to the assassin now. That is Shadowblade, the death that walks unseen. Shadowblade is still relatively young, having known less than 2 centuries of Malekith's rule. His reputation, however, is legendary, and his arrogance is as bottomless as the sea. Fables of his grisly adventures are already used as stories to scare Dark Elf children, a litany of murder and terror that grows longer and bloodier with each passing day. Shadowblade's most famous exploit was the slaughter of the entire crew of a High Elf hawk ship, one by one over a period of several days. Only the horribly mutilated captain was left alive, so that he could tell of the mounting terror on the ship as the crew desperately attempted to corner Shadowblade to no avail. Shadowblade's fabled deeds are difficult to substantiate, however, because no one has seen his face and lived. Not even Hellebron knows for certain that Shadowblade looks like. And the master that taught him perished long ago by his pupil's blade. Furthermore, those that start spreading stories about Shadowblade tend to come to an untimely end. Whilst the master may take pride in the appreciation of his work, he does not allow wagging tongues to spill his secrets. Unlike other assassins, whose loyalties often change at the clink of a purse, Shadowblade reports only to Hellebron. It is rumored that she has used him to eliminate a great many of her political opponents. If this is the case, it would seem that only Morathi has so far been left untouched. But it remains to be seen if this is because the Hag Sorceress is a mark even beyond Shadowblade's ability, because the kill order has not yet been given, or because the Master Assassin has other loyalties hidden even from Hellebron. So, this is clearly a special character geared around the Assassin, which we do know is going to be in Total War Warhammer 2. We've seen from the roster reveal that we'll be having the Assassin with all of its many poisons and the such, which is great. You know, they've got Black Lotus, Dark Venom, and Manbane. But they also said they're going to have a poison. Now, again, I'm not sure if it's poison or potion, because in the reveal, he did say he interchanged them a couple times. But he was saying like an acid potion. I think he means poison. That will help with sieges and actually breaking the gates wide open. So that'll be a really, really cool mechanic to see with Shadowblade already kind of having that kit already there. Well, what I would be really interested to see is a legendary lord, a legendary hero rather than just a lord. Because Shadowblade is not a general. He's not someone you take. It literally has a special rule called a killer, not a leader. And it literally tells you he cannot be your army's general. So I'd be very interested to see him come into the game as a legendary agent, rather than having to, it, of course, have to be a legendary lord. I think that'd be a very interesting dynamic that we haven't really seen in Total War Warhammer just yet. I mean, Volkmar the Grim is a warrior priest. He's not necessarily, well, I mean, you can't have him as a general, but I mean, he's not necessarily like an empire general. So it'd be interesting to see that they have that option with him. And there's like that with a lot of other units in this book. They're more hero roles than they are generals. Malus Darkblade is absolutely a general. Malekith, absolutely a general. Shadowblade, not so much. And even Kouran Darkhand, who we're going to get to in a little bit here, and actually Lokir Felhard is a general for sure, but Tullaris Dreadbringer as well. Not so much a general, lore-wise, as the other ones we've mentioned so far. So again, would love to see that as an option to have a legendary agent having to do, kind of working on his own and doing his own kind of damage. So Shadowblade himself does have a big ward save. He's got this special rule called Dance of Doom. It doesn't really extrapolate really what that means, but I would assume it's because he's so agile. He does have a natural kind of ward save, dodging and evading blows as they come around here. Come around here. I mean, come around him. Come around here anymore, you goddamn kids. But he is the master of disguises as well. So what you really do with assassin units, you place them in your block of infantry, and the infantry marches down the field. You don't know where the assassin unit is, and then when it gets to wherever it needs to get, the assassin can either leave the unit if it wants, or it can attack and say, oh, my assassin's in this unit, here it is right here, y'all guys is fucked. So he has that same ability as well. I don't really see that coming into Total War Warhammer 2, to be totally honest. I think they would have talked about it in the roster reveal, so I don't think Master of Disguises and that kind of stealthy mechanic that we get from them in the tabletop is going to be making it in. If it did, that'd be awesome. There's still a chance, obviously, for that to come. I just would have think that they would have spoken about it during the roster reveal to kind of hype them up a little bit, but we'll see here. He does have his poisons, as we've talked about, but he's got 2 magic weapons, or items. So he's got the Heart of Woe. This large ruby throbs and beats like a living heart. Should its bearer be slain, the crystal shatters into 1,000 jagged shards, impaling anyone unfortunate enough to be in the vicinity. So basically what happens here, if Shadowblade dies, a giant explosion happens around him, and it hurts everything that is within a certain radius. It's not a huge damage, only strength 3 hit, but it'd be kind of interesting to have this guy kind of pummeling a back line, harassing maybe an artillery unit or some archers, and if he dies, he explodes like that with this Heart of Woe, and it does damage to that backline even further. So you kind of have to, it'd be interesting to see in Total War Warhammer 2 to have him almost need to be removed from the situation he's in, or else he's going to cause more damage just by killing him. So that I think would be a really cool item to have in the game, because there's nothing really like that in Total War at all. And I think with Total War Warhammer 2, they're choosing a lot of different things and a lot of mechanics that are very new. It's not just the same game with a new skin on it and a new UI and some new races. They're very much choosing things that are not the norm. There's a lot more flyers in Total War Warhammer 2. We're having spells that counter flying for the very first time. So it wouldn't ultimately surprise me if they included Shadowblade, and if they did do this. I think he's an option, very strong option for future DLC. So with Malus Darkblade, I'm not sure how they would add it so much so. I would think it'd be more like they've done with Total War Warhammer 1, where they've kind of coupled together 2 races, legendary lords, and maybe a unit or 2 from those lords as well, or regiments of renown and such. So I could see them maybe doing something where High Elves and Dark Elves get Malus Darkblade and Aenarion. I can't remember his last name, but he's a guy on a griffin. I could see that because they're both kind of equivocal as far as like being these very generic lords that are also special characters with some special benefits. So I could see them doing that, just kind of coupling things together as they've done for Total War Warhammer 1. With Shadowblade, though, there's maybe Ulthuan and Shadowblade come out together, and Ulthuan is the Shadow Warrior, who is essentially the Shade equivalent in the High Elf realm, and Ulthuan is more or less your closest thing to an assassin. He's more on par with, I'd say, a Way Watcher. He's more of an archer class than he is an actual upfront person. Let's get into the other item here that Shadowblade has, the Potion of Diabolic Strength. This potent magical brew, created from troll blood, chimera bile, and the heart of a black spine mountain griffin, is distilled by crone Hellebron and gifted only to her most trusted of servants. And I actually don't know what the hell this thing does. This is my first time really reading this one specific rule, because I remember this from 5th and 6th edition more so, and it's a little bit different in those. But basically what it means is, when he reveals himself, the assassin becomes engorged with strength, so he jumps up by 4 strength, making it so he's got 8 strength in tabletop, which is very, very heavy hitting. That's like almost on par with a demon, a greater demon. So it would be interesting to see him have that potion, just like we have already with potions in the game, like toughness and foolhardiness, which are actually in the tabletop as well. But to have that kind of buff up his weapon strength, his melee attack, and make it so he's just kind of got a brief second of being the ultimate kind of assassin special character to kind of bring down a lord real quick like. And I could see him having a duelist special rule, maybe an AP, and it'd be interesting to see him have AP and anti-infantry and anti-large, just to have him kind of be, okay, he can kill a guy on a griffin, or he can kill a dude on a horse, or he can kill a dude on foot. It doesn't matter to Shadowblade, he's there to kill. So I think it'd be really cool if they kind of did that to him, to make him a little OP, but also a little scary at the same time, because most assassin special characters, I find that you can kind of evade them depending on their scenario. Like if you're on a flying mount and they're not, kind of easy to wiggle away more often than not. So I think that'd be kind of a great way to make Shadowblade a little more scary at the same time, giving him a stock mechanic because he is an assassin. So we'll get over to the last three here and kind of square off this video here with, well, not the whole video, just the last three. So we've got Lokir Felhart. He's the Kraken Lord of Karankar. Some Dark Elves take to the seas in search of plunder or revenge, but many more do so to escape the dangers of Naggaroth. Not so for Lokir Felhart. He was born to ply the rolling seas, to bring fire and terror to the shores of other lands. It was his great-grandfather, Menwraith Felhart, who first commanded the Black Ark Tower of Blessed Dread, and the doom-bringing flagship has answered to a Felhart ever since. Lokir is the latest of his line to rule over the great vessel of war, and by all accounts the most daring. Following his father's death at an assassin's hand, which unusually was not a patricidal commission, the Felharts being one of the few Naggarothi families who hold blood to be thicker than water, Lokir inherited command of both the Tower of Blessed Dread and its mighty fleet. He acted quickly to ensure both loyalty of his crew and the favor of Ulthuan by sacrificing the chief troublemakers to the sea god's glory. That very night, the decks of the Black Ark still slick with the first officer's blood, Lokir led his new fleet out onto the open sea in a glorious fortune. Tales soon returned to Naggaroth of ports set ablaze, fleets scoured from the sea, and whole cities put to the sword. The high elf ports of Tor Canabrae, whose dragon ships had long been the terror of Naggarothi corsairs, fell in a single night once Lokir Felhart set his attention to it. Such deeds and many more earned Felhart not only more glory than that of his forebears combined, but also wealth beyond measure. Slaves and the treasure flow into Karankar has never been greater, earning Felhart the grudging respect, if not quite the loyalty of the city's masters. The best plunder he keeps, but there is always plenty more for lavish rewards and bribes. Felhart is much admired by his corsairs, not just for his generosity, but also because he fights at the forefront of every battle, a dangerous habit many Dark Elf admirals lose as fast as they can. The burdens of command have done little to blunt Felhart's swordplay, and he fights as naturally as he reads the oceanic temper, feinting towards one foe before changing the direction mid-thrust to cut down another. Ever aware that his crew's loyalty will last only as long as his reputation, Felhart strives to slay enemy heroes and add their severed heads to the growing collection festooned about his command deck. He knows full well that every skull adds another tale to his legend, and more importantly gives mutineers a compelling reason not to cross swords with him. So we have a Black Ark Corsair special character in Lokir Felhart here. He's got a lot of special rules, mainly meant to get up close and personal, because he is another kind of melee lord with no mount, nothing special here. So he actually has this special character called Daring Leap, and what you can actually do with that is, in tabletop you can only attack the unit, you can't target the actual individual special character within it. With Daring Leap you can, so he has that capability, which is more of like an assassin's type capability. So maybe he'll have a duelist characteristic, who knows? I don't really see him as kind of like a duelist in that sense. But he does kind of have a reputation about him as a merciless slaver, so that might infer a fear mechanic on him. It doesn't have that on tabletop, it actually has a negative, a penalty to leadership, so maybe he has, in Total War Warhammer 2, they'd give him some sort of buff that he can, not a buff, but a timed ability that would infer a negative to leadership in an area around him, as say, like, you know, or maybe he has that constant aura, like a -6 to leadership, as a lot of other characters do in Total War Warhammer 1. But he has two magic items here. When Felhart sacked the temple of Gilgadresh, he took a great many treasures, among them a statue of Indin Bloodsteel. When melted down, it was forged into the deadliest pair of blades on the high seas. And it's a lot of our special characters here have paired special weapons, meaning they're 2 weapons. But this just makes him able to reroll any failed to wound rolls. So I would see this maybe as an increase to melee attack, one for probably melee strength as well. Maybe it has another AP characteristic that it'll finally give to him if you choose this item, because as we've talked about, he's probably not going to have to start off with. But he also has the Helm of the Kraken, and it quite literally looks like a Kraken helm, as you can see from the picture. This golden helmet makes the wearer as resilient and dread-inspiring as its namesake, and this would actually give him regeneration and terror. So he probably won't have that fear mechanic. He would probably have terror if he had that helmet on, as well as regeneration. But then probably Merciless Slaver would be an increased negative to leadership. So he'd be probably really good against, say, like a Greenskin army or a Empire army or a Beastman army that have pretty waning leadership to begin with. You can kind of pop that ability and make their leadership kind of flounder real quick. But that's Lokir Felhart here. A little bit more of a pirate swashbuckler type Dark Elf. Definitely in line with the Blackheart Corsairs. We'll get over here now to Kouran Darkhand, who's the captain of the Black Guard. Kouran Darkhand is the longest serving member of Malekith's Black Guard, having fought at the Witch King's side for nearly 1,000 years. His rise to prominence was nothing short of meteoric, for he became Tower Master within his first decade of service, and rose again to captaincy over the entire Black Guard within a mere 5 centuries. Both of these ascensions in station were heralded by the brutal deaths of the previous incumbents. The first was strangled with his own hair after Kouran had been disarmed. The second he hurled bodily from the east wall of the Black Tower. Such is the way of promotion in Naggaroth. Kouran is the rarest of things in a land steeped in treachery. He is an honest soul, a warrior utterly loyal to the Witch King. Such traits are little treasured in Naggaroth. Indeed, it would normally be considered a weakness so crippling as to not only prevent ascension to a high rank, but also pose a serious threat to survival. Yet Kouran has not only survived, he has prospered. This can be accredited to the fact that however lacking he may be in deceitfulness, he has no qualms over taking swift and ruthless action should he consider his own interests to be imperiled. Over the long years, many nobles have underestimated Kouran, mistaking his uncomplicated speech for a dull wit, or his dogged dedication for a weak will. Few live to make such mistakes a second time. Some find themselves hauled before Malekith's council, their careful steps to treachery inexplicably uncovered by the captain's bloodhound instinct and laid bare before the most merciless of juries. Still, more simply vanish into Naggaroth's dark nights or meet with accidents on the battlefield, their fate a mystery to all save Kouran. Such activities have little endeared Kouran to Naggaroth's nobility, who hold him to be a common-born dog with ambitions far above his station. Yet the combination of Kouran's own sense for imminent treachery and the Witch King's generous patronage has thus far preserved the captain from his enemies. Kouran's wits are sharp, but his battle skills are infinitely keener. One does not rise to his rank, nor survive the constant stream of challengers who would claim this title as their own without possessing such ability. He has extensively studied for the use of both sword and halberd from the finest weapon masters in Naggaroth, many of whom perished during the tutelage. He combines this battle art with a brand of gutter brawling so brutal and unseemly that many nobles cite it as proof of Kouran's unsuitability for such a high rank. For him, everything is a weapon, be it a blade, a rock, a fist, an underling, or some pulped fragment of a previous opponent. To Kouran, it matters not how you die, only that you are dead. So he obviously is your Blackguard special character here. He has quite a bit of characteristics that would obviously give you that. For instance, he has this one special rule called the Right Hand of Darkness. And this, what it does is it gives Unbreakable to any unit of Blackguard he joins. So maybe this will give a targetable, or I'm sorry, not a targetable, a actionable timed ability, or any Blackguard around him in a radius are unbreakable, which would be a really cool mechanic, I think. Just a very targeted type of benefit, because when you have, say, some of the other lords like Ungrim Iron Fist and the such who are targeted at slayers, most of the benefits for these characters are outside of the battlefield. So it'd be interesting to see more characters that have benefits to characters within the battlefield, actually on the actual battle map. So I'd love to see this capability coming over to a pretty terrifying foe in the Blackguard. They're pretty tanky. So if you're using them to hold a line and they're now unbreakable, that just kind of makes them that much, that extra bit more competitive to the Phoenix Guard, their mirror counterpart. But he does have two magic items here. The Crimson Death, this huge halberd, was carried by Dark Lord Kalak of Grond, the first captain of the Blackguard. Each captain since has prized it out of his predecessor's dead hands. This essentially just makes it so he hits harder, so it would probably be a bonus to weapon strength, maybe an AP. Well, I would say he would have an AP characteristic because he's going to have a halberd outside of that anyway. So a halberd, so AP, anti-large, but this maybe increases just his weapon strength. Then he's got the Armor of Grief. This enchanted armor was first worn by Arnathron, one of the Witch King's first lieutenants. Those that strike the wearer find themselves sharing in the injury. So basically, anytime you hit Kouran Darkhand, you actually get a return hit back onto you of a strength 5 hit. So it could be actually stronger than what he gets hit with, but it returns the damage. So maybe kind of a reactive armor that kind of adds almost like a damage shield to him would be pretty interesting. Not common in Total War, I can tell you that, and also not common in tabletop. There's not many magic items that are like that. There's probably a handful of them, I'd say anywhere from 8 to 10, more or less. There's not a whole ton, but I'd like to see something like that, like something that, whereas, you want to put this guy out of commission quickly because maybe he's spreading unbreakable to the rest of the army. We want to get him out quick, but this at the same time makes it so that I have to trade off what's going to attack him because it's going to start doing some damage around. Or maybe it's an aura ability, so anything that's in the aura around Kouran also suffers damage from the things that attacks. So that'd be pretty interesting too, so that he kind of bolsters a whole front of your battle line. But I'm really interested to see how Kouran Darkhand works. He's got like one of my favorite names. I always use his name in a lot of like RPG games I play. I'll just like swap out Darkhand and just take it on Kouran, and I've always kind of like use that for Dark Elf characters. I think it's a pretty badass name. But we're gonna jump on over here now to the very last of the legendary lords in Tullaris Dreadbringer. Now, they did not make models for these two, and they did not put them in. They didn't put any art in the book. There is art from the 6th book, and 6th edition, and 7th edition books, and I think even the 5th. So I'm gonna have to try and create the illusion of what these guys would kind of look like, because there isn't a lot of current art as to what they look like. Majority of the fact is it's just kind of like, oh, here's just a generic looking Executioner or Blackguard with his helmet off or something like that. But here is Tullaris Dreadbringer, the Hand of Khaine. Tullaris Dreadbringer is the chosen of Khaine, captain of the Ganeth Executioners, and one of the most murderous war leaders in the whole world. So notorious has Tullaris become that the rumor of his presence sets an unassailable fear in his enemy's quivering flesh, and the merest glimpse of his blood-encrusted armor has been known to rout foes from the battlefield. Some Dark Elves recount that Tullaris once had a settlement razed to the ground and its inhabitants butchered simply because he didn't like the name. However, legend tells a darker story. In the midst of an otherwise unremarkable raid, Tullaris suddenly froze on the spot, lips working madly as if in conversation with some unseen party. When Tullaris finally recovered, he ordered the captives brought before him one at a time. Each died a slow and agonized death at Tullaris' hand, the rune of Khaine etched upon his brow, and their own whispered name the last sound heard. By nightfall, the village was a charnel ruin, that unsettled even the stomachs of Tullaris' followers, and it was they who set the place ablaze once their dreadmaster had taken the ship elsewhere. Tullaris' destiny was forged long ago. He was but a stripling when the first great sacrifice of Ganeth took place. But as he watched the heads of the High Elves bounce down the steps of the great temple, he felt the beckoning of Khaine in his blood. The next day, he leapt up to the sacrificial dais, tore the blade from a guard's hand, and slew his first captive, showering himself in the victim's blood. From that point on, his fate was sealed. He was one of the first inducted into the ranks of the newly formed Ganeth Executioners. Hellebron herself soon took great interest in her talented new disciple, and when the Executioners first formed a bodyguard for the Hag Queen on her journey to Naggaroth, she chose Tullaris to lead it. Unlike Malekith, who claims to be Khaine's mortal avatar purely for the accompanying political advantage, Tullaris is the Lord of Murder's true herald. His dreams and waking hours alike are filled by the violent whispers that urge him on to ever greater acts of slaughter. Little by little, the Witch King has become aware of this unfortunate state of affairs, and knows that a reckoning between himself and the god-touched warrior will one day be necessary. Thus far, Malekith has stayed his hand, only out of uncertainty over which of them can most rely on Khaine's blessing. Meanwhile, Tullaris has made no attempt to challenge the Pretender, simply because the Lord of Murder has not yet commanded him to do so. While he has ever remained Hellebron's loyal servant, Tullaris' first devotion is to Khaine, and to Khaine alone. He has slain fellow executioners without flinching, when he has thought that them remiss in their dedication or sloppy in their blade work. Even witch elves are wary of his anger, and no few brides of Khaine have found their necks upon Tullaris' chopping block. Under his command, the Executioners of Hag Graef have partaken in such cold-blooded destruction that they have gained a fearful reputation across the world. They care not that their leader hears voices, so long as the ghostly words guide them to ever greater victories. So, basically, when Tullaris is on the battlefield, all models in his unit have the frenzy special rule. So he kind of turns other models into a bigger badasses, or more blenders, as I like to say, meat blenders, as I'll go ahead and use again, because that's just fucking vile imagery. But a magic item he's got is the first Drach. This weapon claimed the first victim during the great sacrifice that led to the creation of the Executioners, and has thirsted for blood ever since. And basically it's an always strike first magic weapon that makes it so that he always if he wounds on a 5 or 6, it's a killing blow. We've seen killing blow in this as an anti-infantry mechanic, but I think him as an executioner will already have that anti-infantry mechanic. So it'd be very surprising to see what they do with this if they were to add it in. Maybe it's something where it can randomly has a chance to infer a certain amount of a weapon trait bonus to him or something like that. Or maybe it will further increase his murderous prowess, since he's the kind of the Avatar of Khaine in actuality. So he is not as big of a legendary lord, clearly, and really more of a hero. Again, the same thing with Kouran Darkhand. Not so much a leader, but more so of a kind of a terrifying presence in the Dark Elf lore, and in as an option for the tabletop. So I'm not sure how they will incorporate the last two into this game. I'm not even sure if they will, to be totally honest. I think Malus Darkblade and Shadowblade, and especially Hellebron, have a bigger role as possible legendary lords for future Dark Elf DLC. And again, a lot of this is conjecture, just me kind of saying, hey, here's the other lords, here's where they're at. A lot of you guys have noticed they are missing from Total War Warhammer 1. But it's needless to say that we will get, Total War Warhammer 2, we will get some DLC lords, because we have gotten so many with the free LCs, the DLCs, the Beastman DLC, the Wood Elf DLC, everything. So we will probably get some more lords into Dark Elves, the High Elves, and the Lizardmen. I mean, you can't just have 2 of each for the entirety of the game. That's just not going to work. But hopefully now you guys got a really good idea of some of those other legendary lords, what they kind of bring to the table, and how. And we're going to see the same thing in the High Elf one that we're going to do for this as well. There's a White Lion of Trace special lord. There's one, not necessarily one for the Dragon Princes, unfortunately, but Ulthuan, like I was saying, is just like the Assassin Lord for the High Elves. So there is a kind of a mirroring in their legendary lords as well. We'll go into that when we jump into the High Elf one. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you do have any other questions about some of the legendary lords, or maybe about their lore that I didn't expand on that's from other editions or anything like that, go ahead and let me know. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter, as I will be getting a lot of more updates going out via my Twitter, because working a desk job means that you can access Twitter whenever the fuck you want. But thanks for watching here, guys. Have a good one, and take care.